Aloha, welcome to Unity Transmissions. This is Bliss, and I'm gathered here today with beautiful divine reflections in crystalline consciousness, and we are sharing what is coming in the transmission today and inviting all of life and all of creation to tune in a relaxed and receptive way to receive whatever coordinates are coming in for each individual being in the space between the words that connects us to the wholeness of our consciousness in a super abundant way. So I'm just going to invite everyone who's here to introduce themselves, and we're just going to let the transmission flow.
So I'll start. My name is Tess Athena, and my project is called Gaia Warriors, and I am so blessed to be here in the presence of such divine beings that I feel so much love and presence, and my intention is for this transmission to instill codes and awakening and a remembrance of our divine true nature within the collective.
Welcome.
Thank you, Tess. My name is Ashanti Love, and I am so happy and joyous and honored to be here. And it is my deepest honor to be bringing harmony and peace and love to this planet during this tremendous miracle that's unfolding right now.
Thank you. I am David. I am very happy to be here sharing with these beautiful beings of light, building the new world that we all want to see. And I really enjoy bringing awareness to people on the subject of self-healing with a very special concept that is that we have the medicine that we need within us. And maybe sometimes we think that we need outside things, and I think the inner fire that we carry to thrive, to have joy, to bring joy to others, it needs to occupy a protagonist place in our being. So I like just giving a reminder about that. Thank you for having me over, and looking forward to explore with you.
I think I might have had the microphone turned off when we did our introduction. So
it's okay.
It's all perfect because there's only one of us here. So if it was turned off, we know that the transmission is perfect. And we just invite this love stream to be shared if it's inspiring. That's called gifting. And so, we're just going to let the consciousness flow. Over to you.
Right.
What's going on in your world, Tess?
Well, I think what we were talking today is about wanting the divine masculine, the divine feminine to come together in co-creation and partnership, and I think that's a very sort of relevant topic for the times and what we're all feeling. And I'm really feeling that I would love for the divine masculine, divine feminine to sort of be in council with each other more, because I feel there's a lot of sister circles and there's men's circles, but I don't really see any of us doing council together. And I think it's important for us to share codes, to share support, to hold space for each other. And being as we're the way showers for the collective, if we can find harmony and balance within each other, then we can then ripple that out to the rest of the collective. So I think that it's really important for us to really find that space where we can communicate and hold space for each other and talk about our triggers, talk about our boundaries, talk about things that I think that would be really enlightening for us to then find a space of harmony, find what our needs and desires are, and to be able to have that space be met, because there's just not enough of that conversation going around, and I'm really hoping that we can create more spaces like that.
Yeah, Tess, thank you. It's so beautiful. I really like what you shared about holding spaces for the masculine and feminine to come together. I really think it's been a really beautiful thing to see sister circles and also, brothers coming together. And I think that's super important and has been part of the healing process. And it also feels like now we're entering into a time to really keep the conversation open and going and just diving more deeply into communicating with each other, learning how to communicate from the heart, and just really opening to this beautiful process that's happening within us through the heart. And yeah.
It's very inspiring. I feel it resonates with me a lot, especially when you mention about the integration. I feel that within society in general, we are there's been this trend of separating people through beliefs or whatever else. Tags and integration, it's so important, especially as we're talking this topic today, the masculine and the feminine, and to grow. The growing together, it's something that powerful, beautiful, and I think it's inevitable at some point. So that's why we're so called towards this direction. So yeah.
Thank you. A great conversation, and David used the word integration. So, with anything in our understanding of creation as pure source consciousness, we are pure source consciousness in the form. And so, what you said about tags and labels, my one of my friends told me that his children informed him that they didn't want to be called boys and girls anymore. They just want to be called they. And so really what people, the fictional fiction, as I like to call it, or the world that we have come from, was literally a world where we were wearing lenses that had us perceive that we were either one, the masculine or the feminine. And so, what I always used to say is on a passport form or any forms we filled out, you had to tick a little box that said you were an M or an F and give your agreement. And so we are decoding ourselves from patterns in the waters of our form that have us believe that we're a boy or a girl. And one of the transmissions that came through me in like November of 2019 was called, Guess What? We're not boys or girls, and boys cry. And so there is a deep level of inner responsibility to stop projecting on that belief that there is anything outside of us that we have to resolve separation with. The resolution for everything is inside of us. And that's such a great shift in consciousness. And so one of the things we talked about before we started recording on this live stream is pornography. And so in the fictional fiction, there was a lot of things that were put in place in the matrix that perpetuated through the mirror neurons inside of our head the belief that we are an M or an F, that we are separate inside of ourselves. So if we think about the pineal gland, and if we thought of the pineal gland as a mirror itself, the mirror neurons in a human's head activate feelings inside of the self based on what we see outside of ourselves. So as we start to take our power back, we start to understand that what we are seeing outside of ourselves creates a feeling inside of the body. And as we recognize, so if the mirror neurons will activate happiness, if I look at a person and they're happy, those will activate the mirror neurons inside of me to feel happy as well. If I have mirror neurons inside of me that are programmed to see myself as separate from a perceived masculine, then this shows us dynamics where we can go inside of ourselves to literally start understanding the mechanics of our physical form, to decode our consciousness from literally programs that are active in our physical forms. And if we choose to take these higher mechanics to unplug ourselves, we don't have to remain in that battle in the lower sacral. And it is sex in the lower sacral that holds humans down in the perception that they are boys or girls at all. And so we're just letting this transmission amongst us all flow to see the super intelligence that begins to infuse us all. Well, I'm just gonna...
So that's really interesting, because I've been seeing it come up a lot in the surrounding communities where people are taking on the pronoun they. And then I'm seeing like some people are saying that this is, a higher vibrational way of being, that they're not identifying with being male or female. But then I'm also seeing other people come out and being like, well, no, you need to claim your masculinity, you need to claim your femininity, because that's how we bring balance, because there's got to be the polarization of the masculine and female, and when they come together, they bring like the codes of each gender in perfect balance. But when you're holding both, but you see, it's confusing for me, because I resonate with the they, and I know myself, I did an Atlantean priestess, Ibiza healing thing. Well, actually it wasn't priestess, it was both priest and priestess. I went to Ibiza, and the remains of Atlantis were there, and we did this thing where she said to me, if you feel like healing the divine feminine, go that side. If you want to heal the divine masculine, go that side. And I just stayed in the middle. And then two other women stayed in the middle too. And she said, right, you three stay in the middle. And she said, in the Atlantean times, there were the priestesses, there were the priests, and then there were the priesties, which were actually androgynous, both male and female. They had transcended the gender. And she said that that they mostly worked with sound, because sound has no gender, and it's genderless, and it's a healing form that's genderless. And what was really interesting was I'm a sound healer, the other woman was a guitar player, and the other woman also was a sound healer. So it was like the only three musicians in the group that decided to stay in the middle, and then so we did the healing for the both, So I resonate with like that, and then I also have been resonating with these people saying like the masculine shouldn't be too feminine. They should also be their masculine, because they need to hold those codes. But then I like the softer masculine. I like the masculine that can be in touch with his emotions, that can show that side of him, that can be vulnerable, because that's really important for a masculine to be vulnerable and to cry. So I felt a bit of resonance with it, but then I also felt a bit of distortion with it. So it's a very interesting topic, because I think it's very prevalent, and I'm seeing it a lot with the people around me, just being like, coming with these different codes, and these like, what I would say, people that are really consciously aware are saying masculine are meant to be men, and that yes, you can cry and you can show that emotion, but you still need to hold your power, and you still need to be masculine and do the things that are masculine, because that will bring balance to your feminine. If you're going to be feminine, you won't hold space for the feminine to be feminine. So it's a super like mixed up, like, yeah, I think we're all just kind of trying to figure out what's in resonance. So when you were saying that, I was like, that makes a lot of sense to me. It's just an interesting topic, I think.
Well, lots is coming through that transmission that Tess was just sharing. Like, first of all, the English language is a divisive language, which is why in the fictional fiction, it was systematically forced upon the indigenous, because most indigenous languages did not hold a language or speak a language that was divisive. most traditional indigenous languages are languages of the heart, languages of nature. Some of the oldest languages on the planet are the click languages. And those languages, the click languages, that you hear like the Kalahari Bush people speak, for example, they're always clicking the top of their mouth, which is keeping their pineal gland clear.
Wow.
So that it can't be imprinted with mirror neurons that become frozen in place and convince the physical body of who it is. So that's one thing that was coming through is, it's like Italian. It's romantic. It's the language of love. You speak, how many languages do you speak?
2.5.
2.5. Perfect. So you know that when we start to learn other languages, there's certain words that don't translate. So the English language was never designed to be a language of love. And so it really is a dualistic language. And when we speak it from an unconscious place, it continually imprints upon the waters of our body, the perception of who we are. So that's one thing that comes into place as I'm listening to your sharing. And then the other piece is on my own journey, is as an oracle in the presence of articulation and language. One miracle day, I was saying to the guidance, can you please give me different words for masculine and feminine? And even in my own life, because the way my astrology chart is, I came in with a sun and moon that sit together. And I came in at the time of the new moon at 0 degree, like the time of the new moon. So there's no light on their chart. There's no ego to reflect the chart. And when the sun and moon sit together, that is the unified balance of all things. It's not a polarized physical body. So the perception, the lenses that my consciousness sees through in this form has always come from that place of oneness. And why am I sharing this? Because as we learn to unplug ourselves, as we learn to understand the blueprint that we're inside of and the genetics that are activated, there is no one right way to unplug ourselves. It's literally each person is finding the genetic sequencing out of their blueprint. So when I asked the universe, because when the transmission started coming through and the guidance said, you're going to have to start using the words masculine and feminine, I spoke in a very androgynous way my whole life until I really surrendered to these transmissions coming in later in my life. And the guidance said, you're going to have to start using languaging that people understand. And one of the things you're going to have to start using is the words masculine and feminine. And for me, it was like, the way it felt inside of me was very uncomfortable to begin to use what felt divisive from the consciousness that I had lived in. So then I said to the guidance, can you please give us different words? And the guidance said, masculine is power, feminine is love. And so if we think of ourselves as having the qualities of power and love, when Yogananda gave me the name Unity Grace, I was writing a dedication to the masculine. I was sitting outside of Yogananda's Self-Realization Center in Encinitas. And this beautiful transmission was coming through as a dedication to all of the masculine in my life. The ones who had loved me, the ones who had hugged me, the ones who had kicked my ass home, all the versions of the self that I called masculine. This transmission was coming out. And at the end, I wrote, I am power and love unified, call me unity. Call me Unity Grace. And so I feel like this transmission is providing us these coordinates to unplug ourselves from the maze of separation of the belief that we are either. And when the transmission came through in November of 2019, the one I shared about before that said, guess what, we're not boys or girls and boys cry. When the consciousness comes to that revelation that it's not masculine or feminine, something happens in the form. There's no going back. To be pulled back into that divisiveness inside of us. And that's really what these quotation marks, ascension codes are all about is finding unification of polarity inside of us through interfacing with our relationships with what appears to be outside of it, us, whether it's a boy or a girl or a tree or the sky or the rain or the wind or the sun. So this is really powerful sharing together, because what the guidance is showing us is to, as you said, ask a question, invite a question. The question would be, what is it like to ponder inside of ourselves? Where did this imprint ever come from? And the guidance is showing, again, going back to all the documents along the way inside the fictional fiction called The Matrix, where we had to sign our name, and then the next thing was the little box that said M or F. Right. Does that program the waters of the form again and again and again? And so then with that program, you have like a ping pong match or a wave that goes back and forth inside of the self, trying to find that balance between two words that were created and put on little forms that we had to check off to say, I'm one or the other. And that has perpetuated such a struggle in the human form and been used against humanity to entice battles amongst us in the physical form. We're sitting on these ley lines right now that we call the princess lines. And on Wee's journey through the grids, we have been specifically guided how to unplug those, the false narrative ley lines, the ley lines on the planetary body that have been used to broadcast frequencies to perpetuate separation inside of the consciousness, because as we know, there's a phrase, it's called divide and conquer. So when we are no longer divisible inside of ourselves, when we make that choice, we can make that choice right now to say, I will not be divided any longer inside of myself. And my external reality has absolutely nothing to do with the responsibility I take to find coherence and balance within me with every breath, every moment of every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And side note of what you're saying, or maybe expanding on what you're saying of, and I think it has to do with what Tess said earlier as well. What is to be a man? What is to be a woman? I understand that a lot of the new generation, I mean, they might not, feel identified with what is to be a man, because, I mean, in the culture I grew up, a man has to look like him and a woman has to look like Barbie. We're kind of like, so, based on that, I understand that a lot of people will be like, oh, I don't want to take the female energy or the male energy, because, that's what, the perception that we have. And going to what you're saying, which totally makes sense, it's, okay, you're masculine, so you check on that box. And if you check on that box, you're supposed to do this, this, and that. And it's so important that we keep on exploring. As we explore, we become more empowered. And as we explore which path we're going to take, I mean, I think ultimately it's going to not only lead us on a direction that resonates, on a higher, empowerment, but also with experimentation that takes, and getting rid of the separation, right? I mean, as we were saying earlier, we in this society there's a lot of separation, and with good intention. That's the hard part, because there's a lot of oh, this group is a minority, let's take care of this minority or this other. But I mean, ultimately we are all people. We were all children at some point. We are we are in most cases a product of our environment, and it's important to empower each individual without separation, with integration, with love, and as everybody, and without giving preferences. It's just so yeah. And at the end, if I may give a personal opinion, it doesn't really matter. Like if you want to check the box or not, it's just when you're really pushing yourself and doing a better world and having joy and bringing joy to others. I really like that concept. That is actually originally from the Egyptians. They say that when you die and you are in these gates, they will ask you if you had joy, and that's the first question. The second question is, have you given joy to others? Oh. So, like, if we take we remind ourselves of the important things, what is important, it's not gonna matter. You know, even if you check a box, which box you checked, I mean, it's not really relevant. It's you know, so yeah.
Yeah, and it's bringing the conscious awareness to people to have the epiphany. To the box is the metaphor that someone goes, oh, I get it. I checked a lot of those boxes, and when I checked those boxes, was that programming my consciousness? So these metaphors, as you say, it doesn't matter which box you check. The metaphors and what the guidance is sharing here in the transmission is being put out as something to ponder, to contemplate, to liberate the consciousness from a battle or an opposition that might play inside of someone's mind or their brain every day, trying to figure out this masculine, feminine thing. So then we just go, well, here's something to contemplate that might set the consciousness free from that game.
Right, absolutely, and relearn, because that's the biggest challenge as now, and as we relearn, we have to practice the flexibility. Rigid things break, flexible things don't. So the strongest things will be flexible. We are strong beings, so we must practice our flexibility, and so yeah, this is part of the. I think of the challenge of becoming able to relearn all these things, and it's such a beautiful time. I'm excited because now we are the adults. When I was in school, I used to question my parents, why do I have to learn all these things? They serve me for nothing. And when you are an adult, you can you can change whatever. So now I'm an adult, and I feel we are changing things in such a vivid way, in such a in a strong way. I'm liking it. I'm liking being right here, right now, and in this position. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I feel like the conditioning actually runs like really from a really young age. If you think about it, when you have kids, it's like you buy the pink for the daughter and you buy the blue for the son, and you buy the son the cars and the Barbies for the daughter, and it's like we're literally from such a young age, and from the age of 0 to 7, you're like a sponge. So you're literally like taking in everything around you, and you're being conditioned in such a big way when you've just come from the spirit world where everything is one and everything is connected, and then you come into this world and you're like being told already at such a young age that things are divisive. And I think as you wake up to this way of conditioning in society, and as you get older, you start to realize like, wow, like the conditioning really happens at such a young age. And as I'm seeing around me with the people around me, I'm seeing with this shift that's happening, this awakening that's happening, I'm seeing like the females, the feminine are getting more in touch with their masculine. They're taking more leadership roles. I myself, I'm learning to do carpentry and building, and I want to do things with my hands and create and make things. And I'm seeing the masculine are becoming more feminine. They're like talking about their emotions more because they've been oppressed for so long. Like, don't cry, if you're weak if you cry, and now it's becoming more accepted. It's like, no, it's masculine are feeling more safe to express their emotions. And so I am seeing that shift happen within ourselves, where we're actually finding a balance within our masculine and feminine, where the feminine are becoming more masculine and the masculine are becoming more feminine, and so that we can find that balance with both sides within ourselves. And being the way showers, it's really important that we do this so that the rest of the collective can then step into that way of being where we feel safe to express ourselves in both ways and not feel judged and not feel shame around wanting to be that. And we're seeing that in the LGBTQT, I always get that wrong, but that society where, you know, it's to see masculine women that are lesbians and other that expressing themselves in that way and dressing that way, it's way more accepted. And we're seeing masculine men that are very feminine, you know, in the gay community, that's way more accepted. Whereas a few years ago, it wasn't accepted. They were really shamed, and like there was a lot of abuse that went on with the gay community, and they really had to suffer a lot. And now I'm really seeing that it's more celebrated. You see the pride parade of people going out on the streets, and like this is who I am, and it's a safer container to come out and be who you are. And that for me is a beautiful sign of the shift that is occurring within our planet, that we are more accepted of people's genders, roles, what they, you know, who they want to love. We're more accepting of people's the way they want to eat, the way they want to dress. Like, I'm seeing that around. And if anyone ever doubts that there's an awakening going on because they're like, no, the COVID stuff and, you know, the jab stuff and everything's really bad, I'm like, well, no, if you want to look at it that way, then that's the existence and reality that you're going to create. But I'm going to look at the fact that there's more people that are eating more consciously. There's more people that are choosing choices that are more in harmony with the planet, and people's choices of how they wish to express themselves is more accepted. And that's a beautiful sign of the shift that's going on within the greater collective.
Yeah. And I want to add something else, that I feel this COVID thing and all these things happening are like this density that is going on. It's very helpful, and I will give my perspective on it. I think it makes things very obvious. We began talking about this podcast on pornography, and look what COVID did: isolation for people. What is the number one thing that, you know, that I would say that triggers pornography and all this sexualization of things? And it is the look for intimacy. People are looking for intimacy, and sex, it's a way of getting intimacy for a lot of people who cannot have intimacy in a conversation. They cannot have intimacy with their neighbors. Intimacy of having an intimate moment of sharing, of being like, okay, I'll help you push your car because you run out of battery, or doing all these things. So I think COVID or whatever manifestation of this, it's a tool, because we've been living and we're talking about sex and the look for intimacy, but then on food, we are looking on food as a fountain of pleasure instead of nourishment. And so we are overstimulating. It's the same dynamic we're having for relationships. And we break it down to what are your relationships for. And I don't know. I think the trend that this line that it's falling apart by itself, by its own density, has a similar dynamic on a bad relationship with their relationships. So yeah, trying to squeeze until the last drop of everything, you know. So. So yeah. I see these dynamics are changing, you know. So I'm happy about it, and yeah, and back to what is to be a man, what is to be a woman. I mean, those things are falling by themselves. I have a hard time here in California. I at the beginning I would go to a gym, and I always had a hard time going to a gym because I think of like, you know, I grew up with all this image, like, I mean, my toys, Batman and He-Man, they were like, you know, I'm gonna be like this when I'm 20, you know. So
wear a cape.
Yeah, wear a cape and be super muscular, and Hollywood's still pushing this, but I see people at the gym, and I found out why I cannot go to a gym anymore. I built my own house in Argentina. It was brick, cement, rebar, and all this effort, and I see all these people pushing things, and I'm like, if they would do, like, kid you not, if they would do 1/50th effort, they would build a house. Like, with 6 months in the gym, you can build a house, like, you know. So I mean, what do you do it for? Like, you know, to look certain way, and what have you built? You just, you know, made a So I realized that was a challenge, to give more purpose and sense to what we become and what being a man or what being a woman could become, and besides what we see with our eyes, what we pursue with our hearts and our intentions. So, yeah.
This is so beautiful. I love your laugh and your sense of humor. And this brings us back also to the perceptions of who we are, creative energy, what we talked about before we started recording about pornography and people, helping people understand the power of our creative energy through our sacral. And then last night in the podcast, Tess and I spoke about when her and her partner split up. Tess cried and her partner went to the gym. So there's a lot of things floating around in this conversation right now that are fun, and also we're tuning into something that again opens the field for people to have their own epiphanies right now, because that's really what communication and the joy of intimate communication is about, is when we can meet beyond the ego. This is really what intimacy means. Intimacy means our capacity to meet beyond our ego or our personality, where a higher unified consciousness is coming in all of us. And that's why it's like, one of the genetics in the 64 genes of the human design is called pod consciousness. And it's called the food of the gods in the highest frequency in the I Ching, because when we come together in pod consciousness and we start to develop this level, this flow, it's like musicians jam. The drum circle, we were on the beach the other night, and this greater energy starts to come in. So whatever it takes as a collective to get the ego out of the way, this energy starts to come in and super source us. And that's why the pod consciousness gene, the 27 gene, is called the food of the gods in the highest frequency. Because when we begin to meet in this energy, the concept of requiring anything outside of us to fulfill or nurture us dissolves away. And the shadow frequency of the 35th gene is called hunger. It's the perception of the consciousness that it needs something outside of it to nurture, nourish, or fulfill it. And so this is another place where we can put some epiphanies in the field for the consciousness today, to say that the external reality is an outpicturing of thought that comes into form, and technology becomes the expanded outpicturing of thought. And so when non-material or spirit comes into form, there's a perfect balance that we call the Sophionic harmonic, where the wave and the particle occur. It's like where we're physical and non-physical simultaneously. And so the journey that we're on right now is bringing more of our consciousness back to the internal. Humanity became imbalanced, where more of the consciousness was focused on technology outside of ourselves, on creation and construction through that technology. So what's happening right now, as we begin to realize none of those things feed us, everything that you spoke about, how people are looking not to eat food for nourishment, but to eat it for the pleasure. Same with the sexual energy. It's for that connection with intimacy, and it's short-lived. This is the thing about hunger, is that the moment we're filling our mouth, if we're in the shadow frequency, we're already starving for the next meal while we're stuffing ourselves. So all this is really about is finding a place of coherence within the self. Coherence is key to everything. The restoration of balance within the self, to know that we're not a boy or a girl. We're 0 point. We're not good or bad. We're 0 point. We're not the technology outside of us, or we're not the meditator who sits in meditation all day. We are the 0 point inside of us. So this whole conversation today is about the revelation that there's pure source consciousness in the room that has the capacity to be and create anything. And we're just kind of playing with all of these different reflections, these different perceptions that we're bringing to the room. And in bringing it together, in feeling safe, which is what we're inviting through this communion, for this conversation to grow for humanity in such a way that people can feel safe to talk about anything.
Exactly.
And when people feel safe, that's when we begin to transcend the ego collectively that has held humanity at bay in a certain frequency. And that's really all that's going on for humans right now, is the liberation from our ego, from our personality within us. So this field is opening that safety up. This is what you started. This is really how Tess started the conversation. She wanted to invite more communion between the masculine and the feminine. Mm-hmm. And Ashanti spoke about how it has to be safe space. If we expand this, we're inviting that this conversation is emanating out to all of consciousness, the experience of feeling safe to articulate whatever is going on inside of us in such a way that it is received, and in feeling safe to speak what we are feeling within, the ego begins to dissolve away, and that higher consciousness begins to come through all of us in such a way that there is no longer hunger for anything outside of us. There is just the joy and the bliss flowing through all of life and all of creation. And that's what the Miracle Jubilee is. That's what's happening to humanity right now, is from the mental place, humans are trying to figure it out. The more we gather inside of the transmission of oneness and unity, the more the mind stops trying to figure it out. And this field becomes very expansive, where we start feeling very, very relaxed. We start forgetting about our worries, our problems, our meetings, our creations, what we started out discussing. Something is happening that, in the blink of an eye, is going to transform the entire reality. In the blink of an eye. We didn't have to use a jackhammer to take it down, or a nail and hammer to build it. So these conversations, the invitation for these gatherings, is the fastest, which is a time languaging word, the fastest way for humans to be part of a phase shift in consciousness that happens in the blink of an eye.
I think also as a society, I feel that we're transcending and overcoming duality, which is part of this. With the genders, with since we are young, if you like a team or you have a T-shirt of this color, you belong to that group. If the other team is, you, they belong to another. So like it's part of the duality, and I think people are ready to transcend that, and that it all falls into like it falls into I want to say a perfect shape, because once that happens, we will find more pleasure, as we find pleasure on things that are real, like connecting, like intimacy, like a community. We are going to dry out the rivers of finding pleasure in substances, in other people, in having 20 houses, in those kind of things, and I think our focus is going to be much more, with this movement, is going to be much more accurate, much more real. I was talking to a friend the other day, and he was talking to me about generational wealth. So I asked him, so you're building wealth for people who don't exist in the planet yet, huh? interesting, because there's a lot of people who can really use the help right now, and they exist here. And so, like, when we become like more focused on our intentions, on our here and now, on empathy, on love, the duality will fall off, and we're going to start understanding other people, and really, when we talk about community, also helping, because if I go to a homeless guy right now and I give him X amount of money, I'm not really helping him. Maybe I need to, give him the right advice, or point him out in some direction, or maybe, when I went to Argentina, I remember this friend of mine, I went to talk to the Native American community about nutrition, and she told me they are very ungrateful. And I'm like, why do you say that they are very ungrateful? Well, we gave him shoes, and when we came back, all the shoes were on the street, and we spent a lot of money giving them shoes. So I just put that in the back of my mind, and I was like, I'm gonna go anyway, but I'll see. She's like, I'm telling you. So I went over there, and by 2-3 hours I was over there, it was so muddy that I took my shoes off, and I realized that it was way better to walk barefoot, because the mud will stick to your shoes. But if you're walking barefoot, you're fine. So, that was very useful. And I went back to my friend and told her, really, it was a very good intention what you had and buying them shoes. But if you go and live with them and talk to them with half an hour, you will notice that they don't need shoes. But you can help them in some other ways. And that's important of communicating, on connecting, on seeing, what really people need. If I, just want to help you in a shape or form, I have to get to know you and see where you're going, too. So I think that's important. Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's so funny.
Yeah, I think communication is the foundation of any relationship. Trust.
Yes.
You can only build trust through communication. So I think that's why I started off with saying let's have a council, so we can communicate, so we can find a place of resolution with each other, within ourselves. We can build trust, and once we build that trust, we can co-create and collaborate, and not have competition, and not have jealousy, but rather from a place of trusting and wanting to contribute and wanting to create something that's going to benefit the whole. And that all comes down to communication. So let's do it.
And what I've been sharing, with some of the pod and the transmissions recently, is I've been learning a lot about communication in a very new way, and learning to tune into the heart beyond what the words or the expression coming out of a person seems to be saying. I've really been learning to attune my personal physical instrument called my body to listening from love in a very new way. And I've been sharing a lot lately about, for several years I volunteered at the Humane Society, and spent a lot of time with pit bulls that were deemed too aggressive to adopt out. And so I was volunteering in a shelter where it was like 40 dogs were being released, being put down a week. And so the thing about communication, when we come together in sacred circle, which this is, there's no leader at the front, there's no one on the pedestal here. We're just having a conversation. And I learned with the pit bulls to tune in beyond my fear. So that's another invitation, is to really tune in to the way that we experience ourselves in the presence of each other. At the shadow frequency of the 59th gene, the opposites are attracted through fear. And so these, once again, are mechanics of how to navigate new places inside of ourselves, is that if I ever entered a kennel with one of the pit bulls or Rottweilers at this shelter, and had any level of focus on my own personal fear, it did not work out. Simultaneously, I could go into some of the kennels of the most deemed aggressive dogs. When I was in full coherence, when I wasn't afraid of that projection outside of me, and I could lay on the floor and cuddle the dogs. So again, it's all comes back to it's an inside job and our personal responsibility of how we navigate ourselves from within when we come to the sacred circle together. Not to judge ourselves, but to understand that the navigation is always occurring from within. And so in these conversations, we can all share like tools. What worked for me? What helped me here? Like Tess always says, you have to feel it to heal it. And I'll share how to come in whole brain state so we can share together. It's really like one of the most important conversations we could have is, how do you find coherence? How did you find peace within yourself? How do you find peace within yourself at the round table when what you perceive might be coming out from someone else's mouth to be aggressive or angry or whatever? The guidance always used to say, until we can sit at the round table with the 7-headed monster that took our family out in some other star system, in peace and coherence, we're still inside the game.
Absolutely. Today I read a quote, I shared it with you, that it said that fear arises when we forget who we are. So I think that's very crystalline on what fear is, and back to the main subject, it's what is it to be a man, what is it to be a woman, or whatever you are, or consider yourself. It's just be you, just be comfortable, having the conversations that you want, having the perspective, and whether you're judged or not judged, I mean, as far as how the world is today, there's no guarantees, but I think it's very important to remain true to yourself, to remain, to practice patience, to practice bravery, to practice resilience, because we can all be very brave or resilient or patient in a monastery, but we are in this arena, and where we potentially can become very strong and very understanding of these concepts, and as you are mentioning, being fearless, and just remember that that beyond fear and overcoming and taking action when you're afraid, and that's very bravery, basically. Yeah.
Well, I found it really fun to find this much deeper place inside of myself to just really consciously show up intentionally in a way that I am there to hear the love, to see the love, to feel the love. And that's a choice I made in my life many years ago. One of the metaphors I used was, if you go to one of those, you're a bird watcher and you go into the marshes and they have all the little platforms you can climb up to and watch the birds from different angles. And my guidance just showed me one platform and said, just choose one. Just stay on that platform and view all of your life from one platform. And if you're going to choose one, for me, my guidance said, choose love. And so it's like that coming back to the curiosity. It becomes really fun. How can we find love in this moment? How can we find love in this interaction? How can we find love in this exchange? And the humor piece. Mm-hmm. That laughter, like the humor about the shoes, mm-hmm. And the mud on the shoes. It just becomes really nourishing to play the game from that place, and just go, I don't know, maybe I can't figure it out right now, but I know it's only love.
Yes, and knowing together, because back with the shoes subject, I mean, I see people who are confident enough to walk the earth barefoot, And I grew up in a city. For me, it's a new concept of 2 3 years being barefoot. I couldn't conceive, how could you be barefoot? Like must be in a really bad position to be barefoot. But if we start communicating, and learning from each other and learning what grounding is, and doing hikes in nature. Have you ever tried it? And having these conversations and all these things. And so I think we all have something to teach each other. Like maybe it's the simple things, but it was, and in this case it was just the clash of two cultures, of one really connected to the earth and the other one really connected to this reality, which is it's a different reality. It's not the real reality, but it's a reality based on all these concepts that sometimes seem real, but I think they are becoming more and more delusional. Like my friends that have a 9 to 5 job, and and they have, like, I have some friends that hold very high positions. I still and they have their health insurance, and I question them, their health insurance, because I still don't know what science can do for an unhealthy person. I mean, or what the best doctor in the world, how is he going to cure you? So we have this insurance of of things that we think and project, and we have a lot of power on the projection. So if I give you the magic pill, you might get sick, cured with the magic, but it was not really a magic pill. It was your power into the magic pill that really acted as something that heals you. Or this. I'm traveling to Costa Rica now, March the 2nd. Yesterday I had to fill out a health pass. And I was telling a friend of mine that I'm sure that the person who created the health pass is an unhealthy person, because I guarantee you that. I don't even know who invented that, but yeah, it's I know that, because it's just, why would you create a health pass otherwise? So we are tapping out from that reality to a real reality, and little by little, just discover, experimenting, and nourishing each other, and
Communicating and having fun,
learning from each other, and those things it will bring us a lot of pleasure. Will remind us that there's always water in the river, and that's abundance for everybody. There's space for everybody. We can all be wealthy and nourished, and always, as long as we're open to keep on learning, keep on growing, and have that constant. I think it's inevitable to get to that other point. So yeah, and then less anxiety, less fear, and those things. I mean, in my world, where I deal with a lot of people who are changing their eating patterns and nourishing patterns, and anxiety is one of the things to blame, of why people eat. They just turn off their fire. Ayurveda call it grounding. I like calling it turning off your fire. And so you're just like, switching off, because maybe you cannot take you're altering your state of consciousness basically by drugging yourself with food. So, but as we discover these other forms of pleasure, integration, explore what is to be a man, and what is to be a woman, these things that I'm super excited about what Tess was mentioning, these integration projects. I can't wait for everything that is about to come. So
chocolate.
Yeah.
I like what you said.
I was just going to say, this is just an absolutely amazing and profound conversation, and that everything we're talking about is happening, and it's really a beautiful time of celebration, and it's just really an honor to be here with you guys.
And fun.
Likewise.
Fun,
Yeah.
and peaceful and happy and joyful.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I'm going to take from this is, with communication, like what you said, to respond with, what would love do? What would love do? Every time you're in a situation, if anything happens to you, just like ask that question, what would love do? How would love react? And if you can come from that place, then you can act and respond in a way that will be loving and kind and compassionate. And one thing that's really helped me with if someone triggers me or upsets me, one thing that's really helped me to respond with love is to realize that that person is my teacher, and that person is helping me to grow and helping me to get rid of any distortion within my own field that's holding me back. That's my subconscious holding me back. And that it's trauma related from either childhood or ancestral trauma or in my environment, and that trauma is holding me back. And if I can realize that that person is just helping me have this trauma or trigger come to the surface so I can see it, I can feel it, and I can transmute it, then that person is giving me a gift, and that person is playing a role in my life. And if you can see it in that way, then you will always respond with love, and you will always be thankful for the people that trigger you the most, and you always see them as your teachers. And I think that that's a really great way to respond. So I love that piece that you said, to what respond with love, and to answer with love, and always connect with your heart first before responding.
Wax on, wax off.
What a beautiful message. Yes.
Anything else? I know the moment we turn the podcast off, the next level is going to come out. That's how it always happens. It's like, oh, that was really fun, and then like, oh.
Yeah. I have this theory that when mics are on, it's just like, they take a little,
Even though they're not real, and there's nobody here but us.
Yeah.
It's just a game.
Yeah, it's just a game, and it's a part of the appreciating, the live moment. I mean, it's just sometimes I got to in the studio and we wanted to record stuff, and then that take was awesome, and it was like, oh, sorry, I was not recording, and it's
like today.
We get it.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's all a game.
Yeah. And what was the main thing? It was like, just live that moment, and if you really did a work of art, and it was not recorded, well, I mean, it's just, you were privileged enough to live through it. So, so that's it.
Yeah, and it's
that's
such
the
a
whole
great
point.
reminder of pure presence.
Yeah.
That's why on my own journey, it's been a remarkable journey, and yes, I can talk about it, and simultaneously I just have zero attachment to it. It's like if I share about my journey, it comes out in a way that puts pieces together. It's like allegorical, so people have epiphanies in the presence of the storytelling. And I always say it's not a story about a woman. It's the story about how we claimed our birthright to ascension, which is basically through coherence within us. That's really ultimately the story that comes through the transmission as well. And just, there's this great saying in the genetics that says, ultimately you have to give your ego up. But to give an ego up, you have to have one worth giving up. So the process is about creating the art, creating the ego, living that part of the self to the point where it's like, grandiose on the stage, to realize it's irrelevant. There's just pure presence. So I love that funny little paradox in the genetics that says to give up your ego, first of all, it has to be worth giving up. Otherwise, there's really no lesson or teaching in it. Right. And that's really kind of like our whole journey with life, and that non-attachment and releasing and letting go. That sense of, oh, it was so great, and now, oh, I gotta let it go. I gotta give it up, and that's the liberation. It's just to enjoy it while we're in it.
And isn't that a practice of love? Because love, we call love a lot of things sometimes that are not love. In Spanish, we have a word, we have two separate words. Love would be like amar, right? But also like, it would be like a softer way of saying like, if you have a partnership or like a partner and you say like te quiero mucho. Te quiero means I want you, but it also means I love you, sort of. But I made a separation, because I want you. I want you a lot. I really want you. That would be but it also means love, and people use it as love. But I made a separation on both terms, and I think that explains how we practice love, and it's relevant also that I explain this in English because it's what I see as love sometimes, and that we have to. I think we need to at least practice the capacity, emotional capacity of true love, and that is one of the main points, I think, of having this experience, or the one of the things that makes it worth so much. When we say I want you in Spanish, and I want you a lot, I really want you, and it's like wanting, you want, you possess, and when you say love, I love you, it's I love you and I want the best, I'm happy for your existence, I want the best interest for you, but doesn't mean that I have to possess you. And I had a really nice conversation shortly ago with this girl. I went on a date. I haven't been on a date for like ever, for a couple of years at least. So I went on a date, and it was this big debate. I am friends with three of my exes are like and with two I'm like a close friend, and I'm really a friend, and I love them. I love them, and I will tell them I love them. But that doesn't mean that we're going to get back together. It means that I love them and I want the best interest for themselves, And this person couldn't understand that I have a friendship with someone who had an intimate relationship with me for a amount of time, And but it's that also tells me on the other the emotional intelligence of that person, because if you feel that if you really love someone, it's forever. You love that person forever. And of course you have to go through some emotional digestion, maybe, to clear things up, but at the end of the day, you want the best for that person. You're grateful that you shared everything, but going back is like, I really like third grade, I'm gonna go back to third grade, no, third grade already passed by, and it was a great time, and it was fantastic, but you cannot go back to class and put your uniform at school. You just have to keep on going with life, and I feel it that way. And then if you're really grateful and life gives you the opportunity of being able to, yesterday, one of my exes, I've been telling her years, get your Italian citizenship, get a second passport. It's always great. I always encourage all my friends to get a second passport. Like yesterday, I celebrated as it was mine, she got her citizenship, Italian citizenship. I'm so happy for her. I congratulate her and everything. And it's just like, because I'm happy for her as my friend. And I think it's so important to once you experience love with someone, any of those relationships, they call me at 2 a.m, they need help, and they count with me to come and help. That's gonna be amazing. I'm gonna be happy about it. That mean that I am emotionally attached? No, I'm not emotionally attached. Does that mean that there's a window of going back? I'm not going back to third grade. It's that's a dividing of love or possession, and really wanting someone and wanting them to want to control them, and not being able to feel well at a gut level that they are better off, not better off without you, because they will, like, you're part of them, and you contribute for them to be certain way or in certain things. I mean, you have a massive impact in intimate relationship, symbiotically. So being appreciative of that is, I think, is super important, and it's something that in this society we need to learn. We need to practice more, and that openness. And if you cannot be a friend of your ex, you probably shouldn't never date that person, because everything starts off a friendship. Like, what is it if you were with someone that cannot be your friend? Well, maybe you should ask yourself, like, what relationships are you choosing, and why you're choosing those relationships, and once you digest all that emotionally, make better decisions. So yeah.
Maybe we digest third grade inside of ourselves, and maybe third grade is an aspect of the consciousness. It's just coming through.
Yeah.
It's just such a beautiful sharing, because what it's touched in my articulation in my human form is what I've learned on my journey is sometimes the deepest experiences of love with another are the ones that come together through patience, not through the intensity of coming together, from the awareness of a kind of love that is forming without contact all the time. And there's a lot of communication energetically between us all, because we're all interconnected. So this is what I've learned in my life, is that a lot of the deepest experiences of love that are coming to me or that are currently in my life are ones that had so much spaciousness on the journey together. And so we were all digesting and dissolving grade 3 in our personal lives to actually meet in that higher love. And I've never felt anything other than love in my relationships. I maybe have had to navigate aspects and dynamics of my lenses of perception. My experience from within has been the love keeps growing stronger and deeper. And I feel that that's where what we call divine union is truly coming from on the planet. It's going to come through those who have allowed each other's sovereign spaciousness while knowing there is a connection that is beyond the ego, the blueprint, the play that we're coming from in the physical form. And it's like this knowingness starts to flood the body, where it's just like, I don't have to do anything at all. This is coming together. The field is making the arrangements for these most beautiful experiences of love. Because as we arrive together hand in hand in that place that is beyond the ego and beyond the blueprint, there is nothing left in the space that has to be resolved between us by reflecting to each other. It's like a lot of divine unions are choosing to do that work in their own purpose, their own field, their own creations, their own awareness. So it's kind of like the metaphor I'm being shown is, it's almost like people are, out here doing very different things, but the wave is bringing us together without having to do all that mental, human, painful work. And that's how I see what is a true divine union, not romance, not Hollywood, not being figured out from the mind, but how love is really coming together. And one of the things I've shared many times is Princess Diana held such a high frequency on the planet. She held such a high frequency of love. And the guidance always says, how different would our world have been if Diana had been met in that emanation of love that she radiated? The world would be a very different place right now, because just seeing two people physically embodied in that level of love together transforms everything in the world. And it's called Unia Mystica. It's programmed at the level of the genes that says true divine unions will be the foundation of what's called the new earth in every way, because there's no more push-pull dynamics. It's transcendent of the sexual energy. It doesn't mean it's transcendent of touch or intimacy. When we say sexual energy, it means that the Kundalini has risen in both of the forms. And then the partnerships come together through like a very tender kind of awareness and love. And that's what I've been learning in myself, really learning to attune to the communication of my heart. Is my guidance is showing me my destiny. Even when things show up that the mind would say, oh, this is perfect, I am literally being walked through this process through an attunement of the heart that is showing me everything. And inside of that, it's just pure patience, but not patience from waiting, from the understanding that we've all already come into the perfect alignment of what we call divine union. And as a human, that's just expressed, going back to the mask of what appears to be masculine and feminine, to be able to meet in that tenderness, hand in hand, together as one. So it's coming, and it's just coming from this very different place of information inside of our bodies and from the cosmos, and it's coming from a space that has its sights set on everyone. And to quote Genes, Richard Rudd's Gene Keys, the tenderness has a way of that it will affect each and every human on the planet. No one can escape the tenderness of love that is coming into each and every one of us in such a way that our entire experience of reality, societies, everything is about to take this massive shift and change, where tenderness is at these are old languaging words, the forefront, the foundation, at the very core of our experience of life together and everything.
Lovely.
That was really beautiful. Yeah, it brought to mind this woman. She's like a marriage counselor, and she's like worked with so many couples, like thousands of couples her whole life. And she said that the number one reason why there's divorce is because there lacks an independence or sovereignty within the couple. The codependence becomes so strong that they lose themselves within the couple. And when you lose yourself inside another person, you lack your own purpose, and then that what brings distortion within the couple. And I always tell my friends when they say, oh, I want a partner, and it's this whole thing of like, I want a partner to complete me. It's like, no, you might need to be whole within yourself, and that person can complement you. But this whole thing of I belong to you and I possess you and you complete me is like this whole romance of Hollywood, like we call it, which I love. And we've been programmed with this programming of all the movies of there's the one, and the one's going to save me, and the one's going to make me happy, and the one's going to complete me. And that's where the distortion lies. And that's where codependency arises. And they said the number one thing that will salvage and save all these couples from getting divorced is that each individual couple, each individual person has their own life, their own sovereignty, their own independence that is separate from the couple. That they have their own sense of persona, they have their own passions, their own identity, their own purpose. And once they're living that, and once they feel whole and completely self-fulfilled, with their self-love is so strong for themselves, and they feel in this way, then they can be met by someone that, when they meet someone that meets them where they're at, then I feel like it will have that divine union, like you said, because they're both whole. And when they come together, they create something even grander. But it's not this like one half becomes a whole. It's like, no, one whole becomes something magnificent. So it was really beautiful what you said there. And I look forward to having a relationship like that myself, because we were talking about exes, and none of my exes talk to me. I reached out to all of them. I want to be friends with them. I love them so much. We went through so much together, because when you're in a relationship, you become best friends, and maybe the intimacy and the romance is gone, but the best friendship is still there. And yeah, none of my exes want to be friends with me, but that's on them, and that's okay. I've reached out and I've tried, and you can't force it. But I really am hoping that we can see a change like that in the future, where we can see these divine unions happen, and we can use that as a template for these new earth codes. So I'm really excited to embody and have a relationship like that, and to witness my friends and witness around me these beautiful divine union couples. So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So beautiful.
I would just add one final piece to that, is that is the path, and we share about it all the time. It's why the Hopi prophecy said at this time men and women would tend to live apart, and so on. So people come into their sovereign path, their purpose. We've shared about this many times, but Ra Ru showed in Human Design that people can't actually have the experience of love until they're on purpose, because we're part of the planetary body, and we're actually here to serve the planet, not the Hollywood romance. Which is why when people are at that level of programming, they're trying constantly to figure it out from the mind, but not on purpose to serve the planetary body. And once we connect into that energy, then we're experiencing that superabundance and love and bliss all the time. The ultimate unification of Unio Mystica is the dissolution in totality of the belief in separate purposes, the belief in missions, or anything like that. The ultimate Unio Mystica is that both beings have burned off, dissolved their ego in totality, so they're just meeting in what's already here and present, which is universal and cosmic love. So it's like there's no ego left. It's the relationships take us through those fires again and again, to go inward, to dissolve more aspects of the egoic apparatus until there's no ego that's left. That's the true Unio Mystica. So even for the mind, step by step, it really is the ultimate dissolution of self. And that's where we all meet in true love again.
Absolutely.
So poetic.
In integration, it would be a definition of integration, basically. Yeah. Love it.
So beautifully articulated.
Final comments.
Yeah, just calling on for everyone to really use this time for self-reflection. And if you're not in a partnership, to work on yourself and to try and be the best version of yourself, and to really sit with all those uncomfortable feelings and all those uncomfortable moments and all those triggers, and just to sit with it and be on your own and be okay being on your own, knowing that all the work that you're doing is preparing yourself for that divine partnership. So really just calling in that understanding and that okay to be alone, okay to be in solitude, knowing that all the work you're doing is always going to be so rewarding. So I'm really hoping that this will be an invitation for everybody to really use this time to self-reflect and to be as the best version of yourself by digging into those shadows and those dusty corners that you don't really want to look at or that you've been avoiding, and to really sit with yourself and not bypass and not distract, because there is so much bypassing and distraction in this world. And so really calling this invitation for people to really sit with themselves in this time. And that's what the COVID was so important, because it's made people stop in their busy lives and sit with themselves, and to really use this time as a gift to go within.
Thank you, one thing that keeps coming is the male-female boxes that we have to check off. And for all of us to really use our imagination and our creational capacities to write a new story and imagine what it's like now that we're living in a society where those boxes no longer exist, and how beautiful it is and how freeing it is. And also, I just want to say thank you to Bliss for just articulating in the most beautiful way. It's such an honor to be here in her presence, as especially speaking this dualistic language in English, and how just being in the presence of the transmission rewires and begins to upgrade my whole system. I just want to honor and thank you, and everyone listening and tuning in, and just knowing that this transmission and this miracle moment right now is being broadcasted to all of humanity and beyond. Just a deep honor and thanks to be here. We love you.
Lovely. Well, I am very happy that through this conversation that we have, in an intimate level, very intimate. That's how I feel it. We come across what integration is, and how important for anyone who's listening to this. Be aware of the integration. Be aware of self-worth. Also, and aware that each experience that comes across your way is happening for you to shape you in a way of form, potentially, that it will make you grow, and it's important to acknowledge that. It's important to acknowledge that if you're not comfortable in the LA traffic or in the subway, in a crowded subway, you're not going to be able to enjoy the Caribbean either, So, so happiness, it's independence from the circumstances, and as long as you remember that, you will be integrated within yourself, and if you're integrated within yourself, you can be integrated outside. So, as Tess was saying, take this time to work on your inner self, digest your emotions, and enjoy, because we came to enjoy, we came to create, and we came to integrate as independent beings, and not addicted to relationships, but to nourishing relationships, and create and create. So much love.
I'm just floating on a cloud. It's very, very complete with all these beautiful shares for now. So if this love stream is inspiring, please share it. That's called gifting. And for all of the energy and participation, seen and unseen, in this communion together, we love and celebrate. We miracles in cosmic love, miracle jubilee. We are so happy for our human family that we did it, and this is how we're living through how we did it now. So, such an honor to be in the physical together, present, celebrating together now.
Thank you so much.
That was beautiful.
So much love.